Hey, welcome to Yes Also. I'm Susie Barrett. My guest today is the absolutely legendary Brendan Hunt. You know him as the co-creator of Ted Lasso, on which he also plays Coach Beard. I know him as a guy who I did Boom Chicago in Amsterdam with, and those of you Ted Lasso fans who have seen the Amsterdam episode, all I can say is that Coach Beard at the end of that episode is pretty much my recollection of Brendan from those days. Brendan cut his teeth at Comedy Sports in Chicago in the 90s and has a lot of cool things to say about that scene. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Brendan's most impressive accomplishment to date, which is that he was the co-founder of Kenwood Academy High School's seminal improv troupe, Those Damn Kids. Here's Brendan.
I believe it's pronounced seminal.
I'm
I
so
believe
sorry.
it's seminal.
We can fix that in post.
I'm sure we
right?
can redo that.
Elongate
Yeah,
any
yeah.
vowel in
We're gonna need
post.
to, or people are just gonna check out. They're like, I don't trust this person. It's pronounced seminal.
It's funny. Yeah, my eyes want to make it semen anal. Is that
From the original Latin? Yes, yes.
Semen anal. How are you doing, Brendan?
Oh, delightful. I'm doing so good. How are you?
I'm great.
Great.
I'm happy to be doing this. The cool thing about this show is I get to have these weird, nerdy improv conversations that I never get to have with people who I've improvised with for years. Talk to me about so you co-founded a high school improv troupe.
Yes.
The fact that your high school even was willing to have an improv troupe, did you think that up, or what happened there?
Well, sometimes neglect can have a bright side, and that was what was happening at Kenwood Academy. The guy who was running the drama club, I've only recently learned, apparently had quite the drinking problem, and he took some kind of leave of absence. And by then, we had all started going to Second City shows, or enough of us had, because in Chicago you have that luxury of it's right there. And Second City, had a huge effect on all of us, even just in seeing one show. I think like the first show I ever saw had Bonnie Hunt in it, among other people. But I remember walking away and like, that's the most funny person in the world.
And she has my last name.
That's
my
my
mom.
That's my first initial. I wasn't too far off. So yeah, there was like a year where we weren't putting on a play, as we usually supposed to. So we're like, well, let's just do improv and sketches. We're the drama club. Not necessarily to our credit, it does indicate that perhaps I was being a bit of a tyrant. But the drama club meetings had just become improv games. Mm-hmm. It's all we did for an hour after school, and everyone had a good old time doing it.
Were you getting those out of books, or were you like Viola Spolin reading, or Keith Johnstone, or?
That is a great question. I mean, I knew about Viola Spolin at that point. I had just done a few like improv mini workshops already by then, or at least one, because my parents would always put me in some kind of theater workshop in summer, and there was one at the now defunct Organic Theater, which was a big local theater at the time, where there was like a 2-day unit that was improv. Where just like the morning session was a guy named Jim Ortlieb, a respected character actor of the time who now lives in L.A., and I've seen him at a commercial audition.
Oh, wow.
Since, and I've gone up to him and I've been like, hey, you won't remember me, but you taught me improv for 2 days once, and it essentially changed the trajectory of my entire life, so thank you for that.
And he was like, stop, I need to memorize this line about Toyota. Get out of here.
APR. What's APR? Can you tell me what APR is?
I need to know the motivation of saying APR financing.
But he was very gracious too. But so yeah, I'm not sure where we got our improv games. I think we probably just had like 2 or 3 things that we just kept doing. Oh, and I think I had seen like God, I never remembered this, like a progenitor of Who's Line on TV. So like actual games on like it was like a I think it was Canadian, but it had like Arms Expert. So like we would just make sure.
Whose line is it anyway, eh?
Yeah, exactly. So it was like all 40 people in drama club got to have their turn playing Arms Expert. Because like when you're 15 or 14, Arms Expert cannot help but be the funniest thing you've ever experienced.
Yeah,
in
especially
your life?
with props. We used to film ourselves doing that, but making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and doing it as if it was a cooking show. And, how
Amazing.
hilarious. These arms are inevitably going to smear peanut butter all over your face. Those pesky arms. Got it. So just really quick side note: were you a funny kid, or was this just kind of an offshoot of you're doing theater and you're seeing Second City, and so then it was a natural progression, or were you always kind of like, I'm a comedian?
I have a. It's a good question. Because I moved schools a ton until I got to Kenwood. I started Kenwood in 7th grade, but my parents were divorced when I was 2. Mom tried to raise 2 kids by herself. She eventually bailed on that, and then tried again, and then bailed again, and then got remarried and tried again. So we were all over the place. I never was at a school long enough to sort of. Certainly not to make friends in any lasting way, but also possibly to never really have an identity, even for myself. But I do have a memory once of, I have 2 memories in that childhood, and the childhood was so scattershot, I hardly remember it. I don't know where I was when, I know we lived in this one place twice, but I'm not sure when exactly. But I have 2.
Dreamscape.
Yeah, I have 2 memories of making Mom laugh, and so maybe that does mean I was a funny kid. But I remember one, we were living with one of the guys who owned the bar she worked at. She was a bartender. They were now romantically entwined, and also he was our karate teacher.
God,
and
please write this show.
They really are. They would agree to get me a bicycle, but I was demanding training wheels, and they were like, you don't need training wheels. And I'm standing in the doorway of the pantry, and I don't know where I learned this pose, but as a final protest, I do this Vivian Lee head down, arm up against the door jamb pose, as I say. But if I don't get training wheels, I'll be falling like hell. And I knew I'd said a bad word, and I'd freeze, but I see them just they're looking at me, they look at each other, and they both crack up laughing. I'm okay. Oh, that's something. That's interesting. And then sometime not too long after that, after a long day of my mom's work, maybe they'd had a softball game with the ladies team, and it was just me and Mom were crashing at her friend's house, and it was a little bit late for me, and so they just they folded out the couch, they put me on the couch, and then I hear them talking in the kitchen, and the friend goes, because Mom was going to sleep on the sofa bed with me. The friend goes, Martha, you gonna be okay out there sleeping with a fella? And Mom goes, I think I can handle it. In on the joke. And I, not getting the joke at all, just grumble from around the corner. They can't even see me. That's what you think. And never heard her laugh harder. And I didn't get that joke for 20 years before they thought that I thought, oh. So no, that's a terribly long answer. Terribly sorry, but it is a podcast. So I had not thought of myself as a funny person, but it's kind of all I had in a manner of speaking. So by the time we got to drama club doing improv games, my friends at least thought, that I was a funny person.
And so. you had those early moments of success, or of seeing how it could disarm people. It's viewing it almost like a tool or a secret power or something.
Yeah, like a survival skill that you don't even assess while you have it because you're busy using it to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I meet a lot of the comedians I know are people who moved around a lot as kids, or people who switched schools a lot. And it seems to be kind of a universal tool in that sense, the instant way to charm people or win the classmates over, or and in your case, theater being theater's the ultimate connector. Sports, you're running into each other, but playing arms expert with someone is a little more intimate and vulnerable.
The most intimate thing a teenager can do.
Yes. Cool. So then after high school, you did comedy sports, or during high school you did it?
No, so then after high school, went to college for theater at Illinois State.
Weren't you like a lighting design major or
I
something?
I ended up with a double a theater major with a double concentration in acting and lighting design, which took 7 years to get because I took a year off and I took a semester off.
But you were being responsible because, theater is such an uncertain career. You got to have something to fall back on. So there's always lighting design.
Always, and it's still there. It's still there. I
Yeah.
had those credits. They can't take that away from me.
It's as good as being a lawyer,
And Illinois State, I realized this in the build-up to us meeting for this. So Illinois State has a good theater program, especially affordable theater program for in-state students. A lot of Steppenwolf people went there, and it's where a bunch of them met, and so it's got a connection there. But I only picked, and I would at Illinois State, I never did improv. There was no improv at all for the entire time I was there. But improv is why I picked Illinois State, because the winter break before starting college, they had the annual Illinois High School Theater Festival every year, and there was an improv unit in this one big room at Illinois State's theater department, which they used to be used for the marching band to practice. So one of those big ass movement rooms, and it was just improv games. And maybe I just had a leg up on other kids because I'd had an improv troupe at my school, but the teacher, such as it was, just like kept calling people up and like, all right, now you're doing this, and the room was full, and it was kind of like my first time in front of an audience that wasn't parents or friends, like an actual audience, albeit of peers, and just scene after scene went like so well, and I felt this fucking power, that I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to college here, even though that event had nothing to do with the college itself. And then I always felt at home in that room for the entire time I was at Illinois State. But yeah, improv paused. And then going back to Chicago, where I was going to have a theater company, someone from college phones me at my grandmother's. It's like when you think back to those times, like what phone calls you got, like how did they
landline numbers,
how did they know how to get me? Like,
right.
But she calls me at my grandmother's somehow, and I barely knew her. And she was like, "I saw an ad in the paper for an improv audition. You have to go. You're so funny." Like, I'm not gonna.
How did you find me here?
Yeah,
I am on the lam.
And then she calls me again, and I guess I'm just a pushover because I was like, "Fine, I'll go." And it was for a thing called Comedy Sports, and I got into that. So then, for the next several years, because I still did have a theater company. But every weekend, it was either we were doing, a new play that my friend had written in a storefront theater, or I was doing Comedy Sports. So that was kind of nice. That
what a life!
Every single weekend, I was performing somewhere for $8.
And were you day jobbing during the week?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What was
a mix of temping and waiting tables. By the time I was, by 1998, it was just waiting tables. But before that, it was temping, and temping was a real energy drain.
Yeah.
Just real depressing.
Yeah, I lasted one day as a temp. I did the test. Like, I did the typing test, and even just like the people at the agency, I was like, I can't do this. Like, if these are the people sending me out, like, I just don't want to deal with this.
Is that the typing test that's like, Mark Twain once remarked
I
that...
could not tell you a single thing on it. I just remember them being like, ooh, you did pretty decently on this. We can send you out. And I was like, oh, I know the dread that I felt over like succeeding at this. I was like, no. You remember so Mark Twain?
Well, I ended up taking that same test at various temp jobs. Like I was trying to temp here for a little while too. It was a much shorter leash than it was in Chicago though.
What were your Chicago restaurants? Just as a sidebar.
Just one. Dublin's at State. And Cedar and Rush, right where Rush starts. And Cedar is a one-block street where my grandmother had lived my entire life. So it felt like I was back in the neighborhood, but I'd never set foot in that place until I was working there. But some other Comedy Sports people were working there, Frank Coyote.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Kevin Linehan was working there, too. And
what a fun cast you had.
Oh, yeah. Comedy Sports was a blast at the time.
Anyone else that I would know that was in that?
Oh,
in that
gosh.
cast?
Andy Cobb and I joined at the same time. He didn't stick around too long. Juliet Curry, and her then husband, or soon-to-be husband, Trevor Parker. Kevin Farley and I auditioned at the same time.
I don't know Kevin Farley.
You know his family.
Yes, Meredith Farley. Is he Chris's brother?
Yeah. I think he's the youngest. I don't quite remember. He didn't stick around too long either. Katie Cawson was a regular, and so goddamn funny, and just a ton of funny people. And like, I did not know there was a short form, long form divide, and I didn't know that it was fairly firm at that time. But then I found out about it when a guy named Tim Chittister, who had been an IO regular, came to. He joined Comedy Sports, and he made it his mission to narrow the gap and thaw the chasm between the two schools. And he being about as affable and gregarious an improviser as there was, and that's saying a lot. He was pretty successful.
Gotcha. So was he literally saying things like, guys, we shouldn't be snobs about short form, and was he actively
he was bringing us to IO a lot, and showing us the cage match and the jam and stuff, and we'd play the jam, and eventually we got a little cage match team together, and the cage match team did well, which of course felt like winning the goddamn Nobel Prize every week. It was the most important thing happening in the whole world. Yeah. Certainly the most important competition happening in Chicago in the 90s.
Except for the wet tank top contest at the manhole. But, we can't all win all things.
Yeah, strictly below the belt tank top, oddly.
The tank tops for your dick. Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. I've always perceived the short form, long form divide. I've never had it because I love both. But I perceive it as maybe long form people being a little bit stuck up about short form is just games or something, or that's kind of kid stuff. But it's interesting to hear you say that the short form people needed to be brought to long form shows. Were you feeling snooty, or not snooty, but perceiving that long form was snooty?
No, I think it was because the reverse was never going to happen, and he needed to get people hanging out together and having drinks with each other and finding out that everybody was good people.
Yeah.
And we didn't really have a bar at our place, and IO did have a bar. So the jam and the cage match were made for late night hangouts.
Totally. That IO space was great. That's the one that lasted forever on Clark, next to Goose Island. Yeah. It was a great space, and the upstairs theater was great too. That green room is where I learned how to play murder, or
very nice.
Mafia.
And as many did, I bet.
As many did, yeah. Cool. So you're hanging out, you're loving it. You're short form, you're long form. Did you learn how to do long form properly there?
No, only by sight. You
saw a picture and then you repeat it.
It's my superpower. Yeah. I know what's happening in an improv scene just looking at the picture of the scene. There were two sort of hugely eye-opening long form shows that I saw. One was at the Chicago Improv Festival one year at the Annoyance. Slotnick, Katz and Lair played, and Slotnick, Katz and Lair, I didn't know anything about them. These people were you got to see Slotnick, Katz and Lair. Okay, great. And the Annoyance was a bit of a barn, but that place was absolutely jammed. We were up in the rafters actually watching them, and they delivered. It was just an incredible show. It felt like watching Miles Davis play Kind of Blue for the first time. It was really, really something.
And this was just 3-person long form, sort of free form, or did they do a specific form or type of show?
I don't recall a specific form, and I don't know that I would have recognized it at that time if they had. So I think it was just scene.
Gotcha. And also, where are they now?
Joey Slotnick is a well-known character actor, and Ms. Katz and Mr. Lair are both in town as well. I don't know their IMDb's off the top of my head, but they're definitely still doing stuff.
So they're all acting. They're not. They haven't done that show in a while. Yeah, gotcha.
But I also saw my first Armando at that time, and Mick Napier was the Armando. And, I had seen Mick, back when he had hair, do co-ed prison sluts at Cross Currents when I was in high school. And, like, co-ed prison sluts back when it was an underground thing was just incredible, Like, it felt so... obviously, like, anti-establishment and irreverent, but also just flat out funny.
That was a scripted annoyance show, right?
Yeah, that was a musical.
Yeah.
So this was, it felt separate from improv world, and then later seeing him at Armando, I was like, that guy!
Right.
I didn't know that he was becoming this, titan of Chicago improv yet.
Yeah, and Annoyance was doing such sort of like dangerous, dirty stuff and real rough and tumble. I remember seeing shows there. I was like, I can't believe, this is naughty,
Yeah, but then paying bills in a big way with like Brady Bunch and Judy Blume.
Yes. Oh, that Judy Blume show is fucking phenomenal. Yeah. Cool. So Mick as Armando, how amazing. And also nobody has weirder, more interesting stories than that dude.
Yeah.
Like the things that he just says as a throwaway, I'm like, whoa. He's like got a toe in kind of like older world, like him telling stories about like being in the East Village in New York in the 80s. And, it's just like a different style of partying.
Yeah.
It's like a different kind of heroin.
But all rooted in, what is it, Kentucky he's from?
Yeah.
Or Indiana, one of the two.
I think Kentucky sounds familiar. Yeah.
Now, all this time, I'm also going to as many Second City shows as I can. Like, that never really stopped, except while I was in college, because I was in Normal and I couldn't go see shows. So I only missed, Pinata Full of Bees, the epochal, history of comedy changing show that was thrown together by some people. But and the Tina Fey era and the Adam McKay era in general. So I just missed that. But before and after, didn't miss a thing. Caught it all.
You went straight from Bonnie Hunt to Ridge Tellerico and didn't need any of the rest.
Oh boy, that Tellerico cast. What was that? The Psychopath Not Taken.
Yes,
that's an all-time favorite.
So good. Boy. Yeah. I mean, Second City has had so many incredible casts, and there was so much overlap in those years, like from Dratch to Dorf and then like Steph Weir joined.
Yep.
It was just like a straddling of great casts.
Yeah, and Mick was directing by then.
Yeah. So talk to me about. So you went from Chicago to Amsterdam.
Yes. So then, so I graduated college in 1996 and got married the same summer. That proved to be too much too fast, and I was separated by 1998. And now I'm living in a studio apartment that happens to be half a block away from Comedy Sports, so I'm never late for shows. And Boom Chicago starts coming around again, and like, Boom Chicago was something I'd heard about. Like, you just kind of heard about it back then, like. It was like I don't know, like a ghost or something. Like, there's this theater in Amsterdam, and they come and do auditions every year here because it's founded by some Chicagoans. And remember Robbie Plord? He never came back. Like,
people say Robbie Plord got taken there. Who's this guy with a lantern?
And they were coming back around again, and here I am, and just in this absolute, abyss of post. Separation, self-contempt, and it's like, there's no way I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. But they came to a show.
Can't do it because you were too depressed to like.
Well, I can't do it because like I live here. Mm-hmm. I'm not leaving. I have a theater company. I have Comedy Sports. There's just no way. But they talked me into going to the audition, and I had heard, some idiom that like every actor should go to every audition they possibly can. Which, on further review, that's not great advice. Actually, that's not going to be good. Way to spend your time. But having heard that recently, I was like, fine, I'll go. And, Josie O'Reilly and Andrew Moskos, the artistic director and co-founder, gave this little spiel before we even started auditioning. And that spiel, by the time that spiel was done, I'm like, oh, yeah, I definitely want to do this. Also, there were good people there, like Ike Barinholtz and Joe Canale in particular were two people from I.O. who walked in. I was like, oh, I know those guys are funny. So if they're here, then okay, all right, this could be something.
Right. That's vouching for it. And also how cool to have the opportunity to work with people that you think are super funny.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. What was in that spiel that rang in your ears?
Gosh, I wish I could remember. It was the sound of freedom. It was the sound of escape. It was, like I had started going to therapy that year, and I was getting, I was starting to chisel away at something called progress, something like progress in me, and starting to realize just like how, the aforementioned years of moving around so much had just messed me up. That and some other accordant family fun, and it's like the idea of just clearing the deck for 1 year, just 1 year
Right.
in this faraway land. I'd never left the country before. I was like, fuck it, just fuck it. I just gotta fucking do this.
Yeah, I made that same declaration. It was like, 1 year, and then I'll come back, and then I'll do Second City, and yeah, it turns into quicksand real fast.
I mean, the best, most comforting quicksand
It's
of
wonderful.
all time. The
Yeah.
quicksand bordering on a womb.
Yes, it's
much more
amniotic quicksand.
Yeah, nutrient based.
So okay, so did you get hired on your first audition?
Yeah,
Amazing.
I remember. I remember getting paged by them, and I remember the payphone that I called them back on to confirm that I had gotten it under the Fullerton L stop outside.
Wow.
Demon Dogs.
What was your reaction?
Really, like immediately, sort of like at peace. There's something. When your life is chaos, there's something you unexpectedly freeing about knowing what your next year is going to be, even if that thing is something completely unknown to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I had a bit of dread too, because it meant I had to, tell my theater company that I was going to be gone, and like we were kind of in the middle of stuff, and I'd asked Boom if like I could wait a little while before I go because I had this other stuff, and they're like, no, you got to come right away. History will indicate that was probably bullshit.
What's so funny about that is I had the same request when I got hired, and I was like, Dave Buckman and I are putting up this play. We just got donors to like fund it. Like we have to do it. I just need like an extra week. And you were the one who called me and said like, absolutely not. Like, we need you. And I didn't know you, and you sounded like so smart and authoritative and so firm. And I was like, oh my God, I got to go January 3rd. Like they need me right now.
See, hurt people. Yeah, I mean, it might have been true by then, but like, like I now know that Liz Kukowski joined the same time as me, and Liz Kukowski was like, well, I can't come till May. And they're like, sure.
They're just feeling for the alphas and the betas, and you betaed
100%.
right away. Okay, so all right, bring me through Boom. I loved your one-person show, your 5 years in Amsterdam show.
Thank you.
And a big theme of that was your growth curve at Boom and what that did for you. And I'd love to dive into that, both what it did for you personally, but also how your improv changed, what the improv world was there. Give me the sketch of that.
So you just don't know what it's going to be, and you get in, and I think we arrived on a Friday, and there was a show that night, Heineken Late Night, and the Heineken Late Night show is just short form games for an hour and a half, and you're in the audience and you're drunk, and the Comedy Sports Theater held maybe 80 people and was rarely full anyway. This place holds 270 people. It's got a balcony. People are at tables because they serve food during the main show, but not during this show. People are pounding the tables, and it's rowdy. And it's like, okay, all right. And you got to wear a microphone. You got to wear a lav mic. And they hadn't invented the belts yet. You just put them in your pocket. I was very, I think, lucky that I was arriving that day and going straight into that show because I had such, a sense of acuity for comedy sports type things. This was a comedy sports type thing, just on a bigger scale. And I remember when we're doing the the like game assignments up in the shiny office, which is what we call the green room, beforehand, and there was some like musical game or rhyming game. I was like, well, I'll do that, and there being like a small pause in the room, like for the new guy, like, oh, okay, all right. But Boom can, for many people, take a period of adjustment, and I just got lucky that my time at Boom started out with one like thunderously successful Rock a 270 seat room improv game, and all the anxiety and self questioning of which I was essentially comprised just washed away.
Amazing.
That was it. I never had a chance to be a stammering yokel and wonder if I was going to be able to do this because
God damn it, you can rhyme. You've got this, Brendan. They're banging the tables for you.
Thank you to Do Run Run. You've changed my life. I'll never throw a game of Do Run Run ever.
So you were off and running.
Kind of off and running. And then, that Monday we started rehearsing. So I had joined with Ike Barinholtz and Joe Canale and the great Juliet Curry. And it was our first show was going to be the last show for Seth Meyers and Jill Benjamin and Jethro Nolan. And they were staggered somehow a little bit. But I think, so that Saturday was me and Joe were going to go in, and that was going to be Seth and Jill and Jethro's actual last show. So the way they do their shows at Boom is it's kind of like a full-on Second City sketch show, but as opposed to doing the improv afterward, the improv is interspersed. So it goes like sketch, improv game, sketch, improv game. The show was called something about Jerry Springer. I can't remember, but Jerry Springer was
2,000 years down the drain from Jesus Christ to Jerry Springer.
That's right. Yeah. And the opening sketch was a Jerry Springer sketch where Jesus is a guest, and there's paternity issues. The Saturday house at Boom Chicago, especially in that room, tends to be up for it. And that was just another like super fun night. 2 shows and again, feeling like, well, all right, we're off.
Yeah. Did you ever have moments during, because you were at Boom for 5 years, did you have moments during your time there where you hit a slump or you faltered or you questioned anything? Or was it like from those early successes, you were just confident and climbing?
There's an anecdote about that speaks to the joy of not only the fact that you're doing improv regularly, but you're doing improv in Amsterdam. We talk about this every now and again, but in Chicago, if your last show on Saturday is a dud show, you have to wait till Friday. If you're even, on the list that week to do another show, and you just have to carry that with you, and it's the worst goddamn feeling. At Boom, you're doing at least 5 shows a week, so your bad show on Tuesday is replaced by a great show on Wednesday, and it makes it harder to get in a rut like that. And in particular, like the Saturday shows, which were like the big the big matzo ball out there, because it's just, there was not the late night improv show. It was sketch and improv show for 2 hours, a little break, sketch and improv show for 2 hours, and rarely would both of those go badly. But I do remember one time, I think my second year, where like the shows went bad, and like by then I'd become, a bit of a tempest in a teapot when shows would go bad. Like I'd really because I wanted it to be good all the time. And I remember still in my suit, I go outside. We had this beautiful beer garden called the Light Supply outside our theater, and I was having a beer by myself, and just like a horrible feeling of 2 bad shows in a row, just rotting inside me. And then we had this new bartender, this Dutch guy named Joop, and Joop comes up to me really timidly. Hey, Brendan? Hey, Joop, what's up? Would you like to go to a illegal beach party? Yes, I would. Run upstairs and change. Me and Joop and 2 guys from the kitchen go to some illegal beach party. It was like a 80 guilder cab ride away. I now sort of wonder, like, were they asking me because I paid for most of the cab ride? It rained while we were there. I didn't know anybody, and I've never had an experience like it. I was in these dunes, and got driven home by strangers who were probably blazingly high when the sun came up, but lived to tell another day, and didn't remember those two bad shows anymore. That's for sure.
Right. Did experiences like that, because that is such a unique aspect of the Boom Chicago experience, is like you're a paid comedian and you're doing this very professional gig lifestyle while simultaneously waking up in like Breda with a bunch of like Australian circus performers and just like all these very bizarre, like the magnetic poetry nouns that get put together to describe your week are insane.
Yeah.
Did those experiences change your improv in any way or change your performance style in any way?
I don't think the experiences did, except that the experience of Amsterdam generally made me a fuller person. Talk about this in my show, so pardon those who've seen it, but the Dutch concept of gezelligheid, we talk about it in Ted Lasso too, but this notion of if you're not helping something by thinking about it, then why bother thinking about it, was really powerful for a guy who mostly thought about, he was a horrible person. That was, in fact, why I stayed a second year more than anything else. It was like the shows are fun, but like this whole gezellig thing, I need another year to get that like in my head. If you're, obviously, at some point when we're all first doing comedy, especially, we are all, desperate miscreants living, despite all our rage. We're all still rats in a cage. But also, it turns out, if you're becoming a fuller person and a more grounded person, you might just do even better work. And I think that was the journey more than anything else, direct to like, waking up after the fetish party in a Kentucky Fried Chicken you didn't know existed in Elmira.
And might not exist. It might be a mirage, but the chicken is good. Do you feel like you have relaxed your grip on that desire to control shows or be a perfectionist about things or have high expectations?
Yes and no. I think I would get mad about it, and that was not an uncommon vibe sometimes. Like Josh Myers would also, just get so riled up about a mediocre show.
Jim Woods.
Yeah. It's not super healthy, but it's well intentioned. I think I just deal with it better. But like even still doing shows, here, back at like IO West for, again, 20 to 70 people depending. Still want the shows to be as good as they can be. And it's not even necessarily about always being a great show. It's about like, for this show, what it is and its circumstances, how close are we getting to the best that the show can be, in terms of our work or commitment to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I were on a Herald team together here at IO after both of our Boom journeys. And when you just mentioned that, I thought like, oh, it's interesting. Like, I feel like there are less levers you can pull in long form to control for those X factors. It feels like in short form, there are things, like very technical things you can do. You can memorize and practice your intros to the games so that they're super tight and presentational and you're bringing the audience on this very confident ride. There's like lighting cues that can be rehearsed. There's like these marks you can hit.
And there's a reset. There's a reset every 4 minutes.
Right. Yeah, good point. And also even like the casting of the games, like putting people in who are really good at certain things. Or if you're not good at certain things, rehearsing those games over and over again. I just feel like there's more screws to tighten. And with long form, because it's just different every time, the only thing you can really do to control for that is rehearse a ton, like do reps. But our Herald team was not rehearsing. We were kind of a ragtag bunch of adults and some with kids. And
yeah, that was And yeah, I don't know if we've jumped a step here, but like that ended up being like my last time doing improv regularly, and I think that's getting into like 2009 or 10. But yeah, it was a team of people who were really good, and the shows were less than they should be.
Yeah,
And it was
mediocre.
like we gotta rehearse, and yeah, people just didn't want to rehearse, and hey, life here is different than life in Chicago, and like in Chicago, everyone is on board, and like we're rehearsing constantly, and it's easy, and there's a subway system, and people don't want to rehearse. And like, okay, well, I'm gonna take my leave of this team, and yeah, sure enough, soon after that, we got taken off the schedule.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the issues that play on that team were just like very different performance styles or very different,
by then,
right? And yeah, I think rehearsal would have gotten us more on the same page, or getting yourself used to like how Seamus initiates second beats, or like how to best support Bertrando, or I love rehearsing. Where do you fall on that?
I think especially if you're a long form group performing regularly, you have to rehearse, at least once a week, because you just have to be connected. You have to be connected if you're going to do a great improv show. And like, yeah, maybe you'll be able to do an okay improv show, but like, why do a show that is only going to be okay? Like, let's honor Lady Improv here, and try to already be connected when we get there, because we've been connecting off site. So yeah, I think rehearsal is key. And like, you may have to take a week off here or there because something happens, fine. But like, the default setting has to be rehearsal.
Yeah, an exception to that in my own life is like Sentimental Lady is a team that I've been on for, I think we've been a team for 16 years now, but
sure, that's different.
For the last several years we haven't rehearsed. But even after we graduated Herald Night and had our own night at UCB, we were still practicing, I was calling it rehearsal. Practice. It's improv practice. It's a play rehearsal. Got it. And it's a tryout for sports, but it's an audition for, okay, got it.
Could have done this off air, Susie.
Nope.
Could have done this before we started.
No, let them see the warts. I want them to know all of me.
For Christ.
For Christ. Yes, I do it for Christ. Yeah, I do meet and coach teams who are like, when can we stop practicing? I'm like, oh, but isn't it fun to practice? If you all have the schedule for it, you should want to. You should like it. Yeah, got it. So talk to me about Ted Lasso. The seed for Ted Lasso was planted in Amsterdam, yeah? Or
not exactly. There happened to be one day. I mean, in a manner of speaking, yes, because that was where Joe Kelly and Jason Sudeikis and I were all in the same city together for the first time, and not knowing that would bear fruit someday. I'd met Jason in Chicago. Jason met Joe in Chicago, but we all were together in Amsterdam for different periods of time. And that's where we all got into soccer to varying degrees, some more than others, sure. And in particular, one day there was a night at Boom where it was going to be an all female cast that night, which had never happened before for the main show. And so, having the day off, me and Jason, just took mushrooms at like noon on a Wednesday or
as
whatever. As you do, and just had this great, walking day, but like a lot of talk about soccer, and Jason just took that in. I remember a lot. But yeah, outside of those things, I wouldn't say, like, for some reason it got out there in some articles, like Ted Lasso is based on a character that they used to do back in Amsterdam. That is categorically untrue. So yeah, then it doesn't come along in any way, and just kind of forms out of nothing when NBC comes to Jason wanting to do commercials for the Premier League being on NBC.
Gotcha. And obviously you're the first one he calls. He finds your grandma's landline
I was in his
number.
top two at the very least.
Okay.
Yes, I'm at my grandmother's having a final time. And for me? What do you mean it's for me?
So yeah, you're the passionate soccer zealot at this point. Because during your Boom years, you got wildly into the weeds on that.
Yeah. Yeah, because there was no streaming of American sports at that point. There was no broadband. You couldn't just keep tabs on anything. So there was, if you're already a sports fan, there's a big gap in your life where sports usually goes, and you just fill it with soccer and see how it goes. And for some it takes, and for some it doesn't. But you just get on board. And plus, being there in 1999 was right before they had just had an incredible World Cup in '98, so the country was at its like peak of national team love, and then they were hosting the Euros in 2000, which was this incredible event and just irresistible, and it was very hard to not be a soccer fan out of that. But after leaving Amsterdam, I kept it going. Like I still was a big fan, and getting up at butthole o'clock to watch games.
Yeah, you really sort of adopted that as your personality for a while. you led with that.
Well, thank you for putting that in the past tense. I really appreciate that.
Would you like it to still be? Yeah, your wife, your kids, but really, what you are is football.
Okay, little 3-year-old Sean, let me tell you about how much I love you, but also your place in things. In the hierarchy of my heart.
The hierarchy of my heart. So now you are taken into this project of developing Ted Lasso, and you guys were working on that for a while, right? And pitching it for a while, reforming it.
There was a long time between us first putting something together and it actually happening, but I wouldn't say we were pitching it that whole time. So we did the commercials, the first commercial or campaign in 2013. Super fun. They asked us to do it again in 2014. Again, super fun. And there was just an error between the three of us. Like, well, we gotta see if we can do this more. Another commercial or something. Who knows? And so that spring, we camped out at Jason's place in Brooklyn for a week. Put together, I think, an actual pilot script. But then certainly, a treatment for like a 2-season structure, 2 seasons in a movie based on like the structure of The Office. With many of the characters we've all come to enjoy, but not all. And
when you say based on the structure of The Office, you mean you're borrowing the style, the character, like following several characters?
No, I mean literally 6 episodes movie,
Gotcha.
as opposed to an American structure of like we got to get 22 episodes of this together.
Oh, interesting.
And that was just to like we knew by then it should be set in England, and we'll start with the fish out of water part of it, and
we
we're
knew that
honor...
it should be more expensive than normal shows to make, so that was our starting point, and we knew we had to get Spielberg directing.
Yeah, find the highest mountain or make it.
Make the highest mountain.
But we wanted to honor the Englishness of that.
Yes,
and obviously, The Office was the titan of English things, so.
And had you written pilots? Had you taken writing classes, or was I know Joe was writing for TV?
Yeah.
Was he spearheading the story structure and the script structure, or were you? Yeah, walk me through that.
Yeah. When it's the three of us together, Joe tends to default to the keyboard. Joe runs the keyboard. For us.
And you and Jason play arms expert, and he just tries to type feverishly and capture it all.
Yeah, Joe does a lot of you guys, and yeah, so he's sort of like corralling stuff, especially because we didn't have a writer's assistant yet, particularly. But even when we do, sometimes he's like, "Here, it's faster. Give me this," and he just gets stuff going. Because we actually did have a writer's assistant, then the great Julia Linden, and So no, I had not taken any writing classes per se. Read a book or two, and I don't know if Jason had or not. But yeah, Joe by then had years of How I Met Your Mother under his belt, and was absolutely the guy who knew sort of what this is supposed to look like, more than we did.
Yeah. Your writing is great on the show. Your Amsterdam episode is my favorite episode of it. Now, I'm biased because there's a lot of personal connection there, but yeah, it's such a good episode of television.
Thank you. Was really happy we got a chance to do that. We'd been talking about it for a while, and by the time season 3 comes along, we had a bit of capital with the studio and the network, and Jason ran up the flagpole, and they were like, yeah, we can put that together if it's something that actually is part of the season and not a standalone. But if it's connected to what's happening the rest of the season, then sure. And we're like, oh, we can do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, to be able to go, to go to Amsterdam to do location scouting for a few trips and then shoot there for a week. Like it had been over 20 years since I'd moved to Amsterdam, and a lot of living there, a lot of visiting there. I'd never stayed in a hotel in Amsterdam before.
Wow.
Turns out they're real nice.
Yeah.
They're real nice hotels over there, especially if Apple's paying for it.
Better than a beanbag chair on the floor of some weird Belgian dude's warehouse.
Spiritually, no. But in terms of tidying up, oh yeah. By a lot.
That must have been such an interesting reflection. It's like a reflecting pool to stand on the other side of just enormous success, looking back at where you once were as a person full of questions and doubts and beginnings,
Yeah, I guess to a degree. It's funny because like Amsterdam still feels the same. It's changed a ton, physically, the north-south line and all these things. We can get into the weeds on some.
That's my other podcast.
Amsterdam geography for you if you like, folks. But it's still first thing I do is rent a bike, and bike through Fondle Park. But it was cool to invite the current Boom Chicago cast to set one day when we were shooting over by Junkie Bridge. And
Junkie Bridge, for the listeners, is where we would go to buy bicycles from junkies who had stolen them and were reselling them.
Which is where Jamie gets bikes for him and Roy in that episode, and it was very, and it's not really Junkie Bridge anymore. Apparently, right. That trade has passed a bit, which is also why the junkie they get it from is an old guy. But
wait, are you saying that the Netherlands has a firm social system in place to help people who are unhoused and have a drug addiction?
This is my other podcast. Really don't want to talk about it here. I don't want to burn bits. But she's right, y'all. She's right. But it was very cool that we were able to get that location.
Yeah,
incredible. It was like a if you know type of situation. Just seeing them, just standing there like having the best time was like, fuck, man, this had happened while I was at Boom, and just a fucking TV show that Boom people were making here. It would have been something. It would have been something. And I hope it's one of those things for all of them that like opens their minds a little bit of like, where stuff can go. Because like I remember when Seth joined SNL, he was not in Boom anymore, but he was around a lot. And in fact, he and I were in the middle of doing a 2-person show in Edinburgh. He'd been cast at SNL already, but he was like waiting for the word, and then he had to skip the last week of the show to go to New York and get ready for 9/11. But that was such a like huge like door opening thing. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, one of us, really? And then a bunch of the gang got in Mad TV, and it was like, the world is different now than it was a month ago.
Yeah, so there was that does demark like a light bulb going off for you of like what could be possible in your career path.
I guess so. Yeah, it's just like that's a faraway thing. That's a faraway thing that doesn't really exist. It's almost like exposure therapy in a way, because like now I feel that way about Broadway a little bit. Like I saw one Broadway show on a school trip in high school. Then I went to theater school, and then I saw one other show later because a friend was in it, but like it almost doesn't count for reasons I can't quite put a finger on. But now with my current partner, she loves Broadway. She goes once a year and sees as many shows as she can in a weekend. And now seeing all these Broadway shows, I'm like, well, shit, I could get up there. I can do that. I think. I mean,
God,
I should rehearse.
You're built for Broadway. To rehearse. Just to get on the same page as my castmates. You know?
But like this feeling of like we can put stuff like that on a pedestal. SNL, Broadway, and things that aren't in New York, and just TV in general. If you're just slumming around some improv group that people don't know about all the way in Amsterdam, but your degree of separation from any of those things, but it luckily it all comes back to something that you're probably already doing, which is doing the best work you possibly can every time you get the chance.
It's so interesting to think about these doors being opened by seeing someone else do it. Seth gets an SNL, and now that door is open in your mind where it wasn't before, and then maybe you step through it or you grow into the size of those shoes because you can. Do you have? Do you feel like you are? Do you feel like you're successful now? Like, are you appropriately proud of what you've done and what you've stepped into?
I I hope I'm appropriately proud. Like the thing is, like, it just stopped in a way, because like the mishigas of, like, after it's done, then there's all the post production, and then after the post production, well, now the show's coming out, so now you have to promote the show, and now the show's out, well, now it's award season, and you got to do more PR, and now it's this fucking gamut that or gauntlet rather you have to go through, that is finally ending in next weekend. I think is like the SAG Awards, and like then finally that thing that was Ted Lasso is done.
Finally, we can be done with awards season.
Oh, the Christ! Then there might be some degree of, like, looking back. Well, there certainly will be, and more as time goes on. But at the moment, I don't really take it in too much just yet. But when the door is actually closed, I might be more apt to.
Right.
I certainly have tried to enjoy it all along the way. It's been a pretty amazing experience for sure.
Yeah, what a bottle rocket. And from the jump, like, I remember seeing you post on Instagram, like, oh, finally our show's premiering on Apple. And I was like, oh, I should check that out. I should support my friends, was my thought.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you.
I need to do a free trial of Apple to support Brendan. Like, how dare I? Within 2 weeks, it's like the hottest show that's ever come out. I was like, oh, I'm such an asshole. Like, yeah, they really need my click, Is there more writing in your future?
The thing I'm writing the most right now is a new solo show, and I've been doing it just since last summer, but it has gone better faster than I could have possibly predicted, and now I'm in talks with producers about trying to do it in such a way that it's my job.
Would that be like Broadway, or
that would be
a run?
That would be the that's the bar to shoot for.
Incredible.
Yeah. There's a lot of, like, solo shows on Broadway nowadays. Like, just maybe, not one of the big theaters, but maybe one of the smaller ones.
If you need me to come see it, I'll support you.
I've always counted on your support. You are my rock, and we're nothing without you, and I thank you. But that is kind of getting the bulk of my writing energy at the moment, is getting that thing perfected, because it's going very well, but it's still so new. Like, I don't know that I've mined it all yet. There's just more there. It's like this autobiographical thing about me and my mom and the Beatles. It's called The Movement You Need. Did it at Dynasty Typewriter recently in Soho Playhouse in New York, and I fucking love it. It's different than the 5 Years in Amsterdam show, in that 5 Years in Amsterdam with a little more sex, drugs, rock and roll, and, like, can you believe this crazy thing that happened to me? With a little bit of human growth in it, but then this is from literally my first memory to the birth of my son, and it's actually more tiring than the 5 Years in Amsterdam show. And I'm just sitting there talking on this one, 5 Years in Amsterdam, costume changes and dancing. I am gassed at the end of this thing,
because it's so emotionally vulnerable.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. There's a lot more, like, it's touching. It's touching, this show, but still funny.
And it touches you to perform it, even though you've done it a bunch and you're familiar, and it's...
Yeah, because, like, it's like, stuff about, birth of my son and the night my mom dies, and, like, all these things, and...
Spoiler.
And it's fucking... yeah, it's been surprising to find how much of me it takes to get through the show. it's really interesting.
No wonder people are connecting to it then.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
When you say there's more there to be mined or to be discovered, more emotional depth or more memories and stories or more connections in a writerly way?
Well,
What's the more?
Is my mom really dead? Like, have we done all the detective work?
Everything we can. Come on, it's 2024. There's got to be a machine or a computer that can reanimate.
She would love these bits. She would love them. Yeah, like I have a collection of stories that are either are like connected to her or connected to the Beatles or both. But have I found all of them? Am I using the right ones? Are they in the right order? It's a solid 80-minute experience for people right now, but is that the same 80-minute experience it's going to be 6 months from now? I don't know.
Yeah. And you're figuring this out in front of audiences on your feet.
More or less, yeah.
Almost like a stand-up set.
I haven't had a director yet. I've had some friends give some notes here and there, but like, with the perhaps naive idea that if we're to get it to New York in front of the right producer, me not having a director attached allows them to go like, okay, let me try to find you a director, and maybe makes them more engaged and interested and stuff. But that's where that lighting design degree comes in.
There it is. There it is. Come see the show, and it's just all lights, and you're barely in it.
Strobe. Hard to do comedy in full strobe for 80 minutes, but...
that's what they've said, but it can be done. And it was the first time that I saw Seth Meyers do that I realized that there was more possibility here. I want to close out with some silly questions.
Sure.
Tell me a story of like one of the worst corporate shows you've ever done.
So it was in the first couple of months of being at Boom. I can't remember who I was in the show with, but Joe Canale was one of them, and it was in like a corporate breakout room at a hotel, and which is death already, and like I think it was like an 11 a.m. show.
Yeah. I've done those in the fluorescent lighting. And
yeah. And at least it was in Amsterdam, and we didn't have to get on a train somewhere. But like, it is absolutely dying. And for some reason, at that time in corporate shows, we were playing object freeze and like just collecting objects from the audience. But like, this is a fucking conference room. They don't.
Okay, I guess we'll take another pen.
And one of the objects was a hanger, and we're like four bits in, and it's just dead. And Joe Canale moves for the hanger, like with a sense of, I don't know why maybe I just saw what I wanted to see, but a sense of like, now I'm going to save the show. Grabs the hanger, turns to the audience, and folks, I'm making a pose of a man holding a hanger in front of his face as if it were a mustache, and I'm also crunching my shoulders up like I'm being a funny person. And Joe looks at the audience and goes, "Look at me!" Nothing. And then straight up turns his back to them and looks at us, because it's just for us. "I'm Mr. Mustache!"
No.
That was it.
Oh, my God.
That was all he had to save the show.
Yeah, to utter silence. Right?
Absolute silence.
Unimpressed silence.
Absolute silence. And our, like, frowns. Like, God damn you, Joe Canale. What have you done?
Those bad corporates are so humbling.
Yeah,
and
they really were.
I feel like, each one of us has like dozens of those under our belt.
I didn't have the shop window ones that you guys had.
Good Lord.
That's the Hall of Fame right there. And like someone had a banana thrown at them once.
Yeah.
I've just been hit by a banana. But I was not on that show. This has just been passed on through oral tradition.
Bumper Carol,
Bumper
I think.
Carol.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Tim Sniffen was in one where the conceit of the show was, so yes, I'm going to come out and announce to the 200 employees that we are laying off a third of them. And then we need some levity, so we hired the Boom Chicago. You come on and right after, and you bring them back, and now we are excited again. And yeah, Tim had to like start a show like, "Ladies and gentlemen, well," and he said half the audience is crying. People are like sobbing, calling their husbands, like running out of the theater. Oh my God. So we're going to tell a story one word at a time.
Oh man. And not your first language. So listen close.
Right. Yeah, you don't know who we are, but trust us. We're the 24-year-olds from America who are going to make this day better for you. God, and those shop window ones, yeah, we had to perform in store windows inside, like among mannequins for people outside the store who couldn't hear what we were doing.
Yeah, there was no audio for you guys, and
No
it was
audio.
in like Eindhoven or something.
All over.
Yeah.
It was a 16-city tour, Brendan.
For Mex?
Mex, yeah,
Mex,
the clothing, the department store, and we weren't allowed to wear shoes because the window, like it was like pure white. They wanted to keep it all pristine.
Oh my God.
So we had zero status. We were like sock-footed, statusless twerps. Oh my God. Yeah. Were you on you weren't on the wedding show with me where we had to interrupt someone's wedding reception and scoot them off the dance floor? No, that was Rachel Miller and Jim Woods. I can't get enough of bad corporate stories.
It's really quite the genre.
Yeah. Did you ever have an unbelievably great tour show or some place where you got to perform in Singapore or something?
The closest was one in Cyprus.
That's cool.
Which and Cyprus is basically a rock. And I don't mean the
sick
country
burn.
Iraq. I mean it is a rock. It is a rock.
Wow, you hate
formation
Cyprus.
in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. There might be beaches. We didn't see them. The show was done for this like swinging corporate company that like they were all in togas as we did the show, and the show went really well. But then I got so drunk that I almost missed the flight. Like, I also woke up in the room of one of the clients, which is the only time that happened.
Did you make the sale? Did the merger go through?
I made my flight. That's all.
Wow.
That's all I can tell you.
Wow.
But like, get to the, everyone's like boarding the plane, and Kate Cannon sees me like, oh, good. And like, you don't want Kate Cannon mad at you. But yeah, barely made that. But yeah.
Now that you are a father and about to be a father for a second time, do you have a desire to get Sean and baby number 2 into theater? Are you seeing like proclivities for that in him?
You're surrounded by chances to get your cutie in a commercial at any time, and like we don't want to impose that on him. We like if he ever asks to start, ask questions about performing and stuff, then we will follow that thread.
Make me some money, kid.
But whether they get into performing or not, one thing that I do have in my sights for the future is to get them into improv classes, because I do think, and I believe this firmly, like improv class is one of the best things you can do, especially when you're young. The audience of this podcast probably knows this already, but it's not about, teaching someone how to be funny. It's teaching you how to listen. How to listen and how to have a conversation, and that is a skill. The word skill almost demeans it, but like that is a skill that will serve you for the rest of your life, no matter where you are or what you're doing, and will also serve the people around you. So there's that.
I feel like improv is a synthesis of all the soft skills we aim to teach preschoolers. It's like trust, listening, being a good teammate, being sweet, and as adults we lack that as a general population. So the sooner you get that into their bones, the better. Well, thanks for being here. I wish we could do this for another hour, but we can't.
Time is a construct.
Oh wait, now I do have. I would like to hear about this. Hold on, I'll cancel. Ryan, cancel our next session. What do you mean?
20 hours later. No, this has been delightful. Thank you for having me.
Do you have anything you want to plug or?
If you see a show called The Movement You Need out there, happen on a stage near you, maybe go check it out. And Ted Lasso still streaming on Apple TV Plus.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here, Brennan. I'll see you later.
Thank you, Susie. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye. If you have a question about improv that you would like me to ask a future guest, email it to yesalsopod@gmail.com and I will get it on the show. If you're a fan of the show, follow us on Instagram at yesalsopod And please help us out by liking, rating, reviewing, clicking, sending, talking, and blasting us to your improv communities. That will help us out a lot. If you're a theater who would like to host us for a live recording and improv show, let us know at yesalsopod@gmail.com. A huge shout out to Ryan Rosenberg, who produced this thing with his generous help and his unlimited knowledge about all things podcast. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week. No, we won't, Susie. That's not how podcasts work. They won't even see us. They will listen to us. So it's actually the opposite of both things you said. Thanks for listening, and you will listen to us next week. Maybe. I don't know.